first time in history, those 85 and older are the fastest growing segment of the population, and within 25 years, there will be over 70 million elderly living in America.
We haven't even begun to contemplate what this means.
What's going on, guys? My name is Mckensy Long. Welcome to the channel where we talk about everything finance related. And today we're going to be talking about the huge challenges that we're having with this aging population. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem like the government really has an answer for it.
It's an economic as well as a human demand on strapped middle-aged and middle-class families. They're still caring for their children when they're also caring for mom and dad.
Americans 85 and older are now the fastest growing segment of the population.
And exactly as he mentioned, one of the challenges that we're having is my generation, our generation, is called the sandwich generation. And basically it means that we're here, we're having to take care of our kids, and we're also going to, or we are taking care of our elderly parents. So the challenge being with that is, well, how do we finance all of these things? And we're one of the first generations that have really had to deal with this on a grand scale. And we'll get into talking a little bit about some of the challenges and things that have failed along the way, because this is becoming a bigger and bigger issue the more we look at it.
On Thursday, November 16th, roughly 10,000 Americans celebrated their 65th birthday. The same thing will happen Friday and Saturday and every day for the next 6 years. And by most accounts, the United States healthcare system is not prepared. 1 year in a nursing home could cost you $100,000, but 56% of adults said it would be impossible for them to afford that, according to a KFF survey.
Yeah, could you imagine having to come up with an extra $100,000 a year to take care of an elderly spouse who needs to be in some kind of long-term care facility? And as he mentioned, this is becoming a very real possibility and a real scenario for a lot of Americans. And elderly people turning 65, it's over 10,000 per day are turning 65. And so we've got this massive population that's heading into an elderly type, we would normally call it retirement, but the challenge is with the advances in modern medication and what we're able to do on the health side, we're living so much longer. The challenge with that is the quality of life there. And also, how do we pay for those extra years of living, especially when we're now living into our 90s, our hundreds, and our age and the younger generation, the one behind us, will probably live into their 120s, which becomes a very interesting thing to have to talk about is how do we pay for all of this stuff? What are some of the options? And what do we do from here if we can't get this figured out on how to take care of our parents as they get older?
Medicare and Social Security were supposed to do something towards this. Why aren't they covering these costs?
Well, part of it is because we've changed. We are living longer, and Medicare is really focused on acute illnesses. It will help if you've fallen and need some short-term rehab. But the real problem is that there's no real solution for long-term care unless you're very poor.
So one of the options is if you decide to be very poor, well, then the government will kind of take care of you, but it only will really help if you want to be inside of a nursing home. And if you have some assets, basically what they'll do is they'll take those assets away or deplete them until you pay everything that you can. And then after you run out of money, then basically the government will help take care of some of those things, but only in the event of a long-term care scenario, which means that you're not able to do certain acts of daily living. The challenge with that is, like they mentioned, is that you have to be very poor to be able to qualify for that. So if you have any assets, if you have a home, if you have some retirement savings, whatever it might be, the government's going to take all of it and deplete it until up until that you can pay for all this stuff yourself. And then after that, you basically get it at no cost. Now, the challenge with that is they will also track back 7 years, meaning that if you transferred your 401k 4 years ago, and now you're saying that you don't have any money, they go back and track that and make sure that you still use those funds. So it's important if you have a parent who's getting older to kind of plan for some of these things, and obviously the earlier, the better.
Help us understand the cost. So there's the cost of long-term care, those are going up, and then there's also a shortage of workers.
Right, especially in home care, but also in nursing homes. I mean, the truth is this is very difficult work. It doesn't pay a whole lot, and so there aren't enough workers. It's as simple as that.
And Have there been legislative attempts to fix that problem?
Well, you mentioned obviously there was some attempt by the current administration to fund home care so that caregivers would be paid more, but that didn't go anywhere. It's really a matter of money. And so it's not clear whether, we can come up with a system where people could, in fact, pay into some sort of system so that they could then, draw on it when they needed it. And obviously there are people who think that Medicare should be changed.
To incorporate this?
Yes.
Yeah, and so there's a huge challenge there, right? Because my wife and I, we work with some businesses on their employee benefits, and so that are in that specific home health care realm. And the challenge is they get paid little or nothing. Now, since then, this has been updated. I think they went from like $12 an hour to $16 an hour. But the challenge is they have licenses, they're 1099 usually, they're in and out of people's homes, so you think about sickness and everything else. So the challenge with keeping these home care professionals going is that they're making basically minimum wage now. You can have no licenses, go work at McDonald's and make $20, $25 an hour in some states. So why would you carry the burden of having to, no offense, but wipe elderly people's behinds and clean them and keep these licenses and everything else, which has costs to it, if you can get a job that doesn't really require as much of a barrier of entry to go work at McDonald's and make more money, why wouldn't you just do something like that? So there's got to be a reform for what we're actually doing if we want more people to be in home health care, because right now they're simply not paying a whole lot. And a lot of these businesses are struggling because since they're not paying the home care individuals very much, the businesses who hire those people offer them employee benefits, try to put all of this stuff together because somebody needs to run that whole part of the operation. They're making very little or nothing. A lot of them over the last few years have gone out of business simply because there's not enough profit in it for them to stay in it long term, which means there's even less people who can go in there and do the home health care that we need. So that's something that we definitely need help with in our society now.
Somebody's listening to this and they happen to be younger or concerned about this for themselves. What are the solutions that if legislation ain't coming?
Well, I do think saving money on your own is obviously important. But interestingly, it's also really important to talk about this with your family. I mean, I was stunned by how many people never discuss this until there's a crisis.
And having done it, those kinds of discussions, when there's a crisis, they don't go so well.
Yeah, exactly.
What other kinds of fixes might there be out there that would address this problem?
So there are a few people, I mean, a minority of people have long-term care insurance. And that certainly helps. All of the government's attempts to try and replicate that system haven't worked.
So basically what she's saying is that we're going to have to figure it out on our own. And the government has failed in multiple ways in trying to do this. Social Security is not doing that great of a job. Medicare and Medicaid is not doing that great of a job. And those are running out of money as well. So without raising taxes at the rate of 10,000 people per day who are coming into this age of needing assistance and needing a home, what are we going to do about that? How do we pay for that except for to raise taxes? Now, she mentioned a couple good points. Obviously, your personal savings is going to be a huge benefit there. But even at that, if you're talking for trying to retire, taking care of some kids, and you're going to have to spend $100,000 a year. Now, obviously, if they're in home, it's not going to be as much. You can save a lot of money doing it that way. But how do you come out of pocket $100,000 a year from your retirement and still retire? So that's a huge challenge as well. So one of the biggest things that we've been able to implement with our clients is long-term care insurance. Now, the challenge is it usually falls into two categories. One of them is going to be straight long-term care, which is great. But the downside to it is even though 70% of people are going to need long-term care assistance, if you're in that 30% and you pay for long-term care, you get nothing. It's basically a use it or lose it. So you could put thousands, tens, 20, 30, $40,000 into a long-term care policy. If you don't need it, you kind of just wasted it. Or the other option is to put it into a permanent life insurance policy. And this is where it can become a lot more attainable. So if you're thinking about using a permanent life insurance policy towards retirement, well, you can add on the rider for long-term care at very little extra cost, and then it has that benefit attached to it. And then that way, if you don't use it, you still get that money back in the life insurance. Or if you don't use either of those two, you can also use it for the cash value. So a lot of people are opting towards that permanent life insurance, things like IULs, where you can add that long-term care benefit into it. And I think everybody needs to start thinking about these. If you're my age, if you're in your 30s, 40s, and 50s, you need to start thinking about long-term care now. Put it into maybe a long-term care, or put it into a IUL or some kind of permanent insurance policy. That way it doesn't add in that burden of an extra $400 or $500 a month coming out. Maybe it's $10, $20 a month for adding a long-term care rider to your permanent life insurance policy. And then that way you can kind of double dip. So whether you live healthy, you can use the cash value. Whether you pass away, you can use the death benefit. Or if you get sick and you need long-term care, you can activate that and turn that on as well. I think that's going to be the best path moving forward for most people.
Why haven't there been any legislative fixes other than, I mean, maybe it's just the normal sclerosis of Congress, but is there any particular trickiness with this issue?
I think it's really the money. I think it's very costly. And to be honest, there just hasn't been either the political and maybe even the cultural will to spend that kind of money.
Speaking of cultural will, a lot of this burden of long-term care falls on women. So is this a gender equality thing as well as a money thing?
Yes, women, whether they're daughters, even granddaughters, are, either doing work part-time, sometimes leaving their jobs to care for their parents. And there have been studies that show that their income actually has really, their lifetime income has really been affected. So yes, this really is a burden on women. And one could argue that as long as women are stepping up, there's no political will to fix it.
Yeah, that's so true. Unfortunately, this also kind of falls on the burden on the shoulders of women. So women, it's even more important for you to understand financial literacy. It's important for you to understand how money works, because you are the ones that are going to be burdened with all of this. You're the ones that, us as guys, we usually pass away first. And we're usually the ones that take care of a lot of the stuff as far as finances go, or at least what we see in our industry. And so that's why it's so important as a woman to at least be involved in the conversations. We've had so many people that we've had to help them. Their spouse passed away. They didn't know how to log into anything. They didn't know how to pay bills. They didn't know how to take care of any of the finances. And we really don't want that to happen. Women need to be more involved in those conversations so that they know what's going to happen into the future. And unfortunately or fortunately, you guys are the decision makers. And so you're the ones that are going to have to step up and tell your husbands, we're going to have to do this for our aging parents. We need to make sure that they have some long-term care in place. And the earlier, the better. I know that's always kind of cliche, but I can't tell you how many times people come to me and say, hey, well, I'm 70 now and I'd like to get some long-term care. That's just not going to happen. It's not a buy it when you need it. It's a buy it long before you need it, get it at a lower price, pay it over a longer period of time, and then that way you can use it and you actually have it when you need it. But it's like trying to buy life insurance once you're already sick. It's just not going to happen. Same thing with long-term care. You can't really buy it when you need it. So get it early, get it young, get it while it's affordable, while you're still healthy, and then that way you can turn it on and activate it when you actually need it. So those are really the options. Save a bunch more money, figure out how to get some kind of long-term care, either as a standalone or add it onto your permanent life insurance policy, or go broke and then just let the state take care of you until we run out of money there, and then we don't know how to take care of everybody at that point. Because at this rate, at $10,000 per day, I don't think the country is going to actually be able to handle that kind of volume coming up in these next 10, 20 years from now. So I think that burden is really going to be on us, and it's something else that we have to think about. And I think a long-term care policy inside of your permanent life insurance policy is going to be one of the best catch-alls, that way you're not just throwing money away. So anyway, I hope this was helpful. I'll catch you guys later. Bye.